Welcome to the Gemini full moon, everyone. This is an exciting time because after this lunation, we have a Sagittarius new moon on December 20th. 2 days later, we have the winter solstice, and that's it. That's it for our autumn story, which has been a very surreal time. It's been liminal, it's been an interlude, it's been an in between, it's been a great open ended passage that has been somewhat difficult to manage because we're stuck between A and B. B to me is 2026. It's a great global reset where there will be a lot of massive, widespread change that it can't be turned back. Once it's here, it's out of the bag. A is the past. A is what we've been looking back to. We've had a lot of retrograde planets. In fact, just this past Black Friday, we had Mercury going direct. He's been slowing down since October 21st, new moon in Libra. Saturn had been retrograde since the summer, so he went direct as well. Here in a few days, we're going to have Neptune going direct. Pluto went direct on October 14th, and he's actually going to get up to about 2 degrees later in December. He's been hovering at about 1 degree since that time. It's a very slow-moving planet, obviously, as you can tell. So things are moving forward, and I feel like this Gemini full moon is a green light in that direction, getting us to be, trying to get us. We only have 2 lunations left before Sun goes into Capricorn, and also Venus, Mars, and Mercury, all the personal planets, will also go into Capricorn, right around Christmas, and that's a complete tone shift. So we only have 2 lunations left to get us out of this liminal feeling. Now, typically around this time, we should be having the Sagittarius new moon, followed by a full moon. That's typically how things work. Every year, around this time of year, between Thanksgiving and the solstice, we have a Sagittarius new moon and a Gemini full moon. And that axis, the Gemini-Sagittarius axis, is about information and flurry of activity and closing out a transition to get us into the winter season, the winter solstice of Sun in Capricorn, where, it's very contemplative. You go maybe to Candlemas and sit in a quiet church on the winter solstice and feel the stillness and feel the return of light and longer days. It's the most boringest time of year, to put a spin on that old Christmas song. It is the most wonderful time of year, but it's, maybe you and 2 other people at the office grinding it out before you go home and spend some time with your family. That's very Capricorn. So we get this flurry of activity every year with Gemini and Sagittarius lunar cycles. And like I said, typically we should have the Sag new moon now, but we're actually going to have it on the 20th. It's way late in the year, like 2 days before the winter solstice. And the reason that we're having the Gemini full moon now is the same reason why we are in this weird multi-month transitional zone of wrapping up things from our past in preparation for a global reset in 2026. What's happened is that on August 23rd, we had a new moon at 0 degree Virgo. 14 days later, as we usually do, 14 days after a new moon, we had a full moon. That was the September 7th Pisces lunar eclipse. Another 14 days, we had a new moon after the full moon, as we mathematically have to. But since the sun gets 30 degrees in every sign, we got up to about 29 degrees Virgo on September 21st for a second new moon in Virgo. And that was a solar eclipse, in fact. And because of that, we've had these flipped lunations. We really shouldn't be having 2 new moons in the same sign, but due to how things played out, and I talked a lot about that in my previous videos. In fact, there were a lot of planets also hovering around the end degrees and the 0 degrees of signs, like switches going on and off all this fall. Just a completely bizarre fall. Well, because of that, we are getting the Gemini full moon now rather than deeper in December and then having a little breather and then Sun going into Capricorn season. What that means is, I really like the Gemini full moon every year. I feel like it's this flurry of activity of like pretty lights. I kind of like a key word for full moon in Gemini for me would be glitter, because Gemini is the small details, and then it's illuminated by the festive Sagittarius sun. So we're getting all that now, and then on the 20th, at the Sagittarius new moon, we'll be like, oh, this is why we have all these puzzle pieces in a box, because, oh, look, we put it together, and it's like a landscape of a snow blanketed mountain, or like, oh, it's a little scene of people ice skating or something. That's what that new moon will do. So we have all these pieces, and all these pieces, I think, will help us understand why we've had to spend this fall in a liminal zone, in between, as an interlude, passing in between A and B, not yet to this crystallized future. It's going to give us all the pieces. And then Sagittarius, very quickly, 2 days before the winter solstice, and all these other planets go into Capricorn and really change the tone of the cosmic story, is like, oh, here's how you put them all together. Like, it's going to be rather quick ending, I feel, to the fall. Like, it's all just going to kind of, I mean, I'm just thinking personally of some reflections I was having last night as I was, reflecting on the astrology. I was doing some personal reflection, and I'm like, oh, wow, so that's how that connects, and that's why that person said that, or why I thought that. Like, it just, I wasn't really expecting it. I knew that was the message, but I was like, let's see how it happens. And then I was like, oh, okay, like some threads are really coming together here. And I think it'll be wrapped up really fast. And then we're just going to have to go into our winter theme, which is about the reset of the entire global culture in 2026. Now, another interesting thing that's happening is that mathematically, as I'll talk about here, is today's, the December 4th Gemini full moon mathematically connects to the September 7th eclipse. So the eclipse has influenced these flipped lunations, and the Sagittarius Gemini cycle, like I said, every year is already about information. I think it's really providing closure because it speaks directly to that eclipse and says, you threw things out of whack, but we understand now that you did it for a reason, and we're going to give humanity all the information that they need, whether it's, you've been trying to figure out what's going on with an ex-lover, or have been wanting to leave a job, or you did leave a job, or you're getting a new job, but that would cause you to move your family, or maybe, one of if you're married, like your spouse has been working overtime and you've done a lot of work to pick up the slack on the domestic front. A lot of people have been going through changes at home, not just professionally, or moving geographically, or, it's not just romance either, of dealing with changes with who they're dating. It's pretty widespread, basically. But the whole, what I'm getting at is that it never really has crystallized into anything where it's like, oh, this is my role, you're this to me, I'm that to you, you do this, I do that. It's been really fluid. And I think that that's been really tough for a lot of people, because they're like, well, what, can we just like crystallize this so that we can figure out if this is a temporary thing or if this is like the new normal or a new state of affairs? And I think this Gemini full moon comes in here and says, gives you your answer as to what that may be. Or is this person more of a supporting character in your life, or are they going to be more committed? And when we get into Capricorn season and the Sun, Mercury, Mars, and Venus go into this sign of commitment and trust and high standards and integrity, we're not going to have this fluid energy of the Virgo Pisces eclipses in September, or the Gemini Sagittarius lunar cycle that we have every year between Thanksgiving and the solstice, in which this year in particular, not just because of the flipped lunations, but because of the math, are speaking directly to those loose eclipses of September. So we're not going to have this loose energy as much. In fact, Neptune, which is in Pisces, a very fluid planet in his preferred fluid sign, when he goes direct, he's angling to meet Saturn in Aries, which is a very hard-nosed cardinal sign like Capricorn, on Valentine's Day of all days. So stuff's is going to get really tightened up, and you might kind of miss, you might kind of pine for these times where things were really loose and indecisive. But right now it's kind of maddening because, a lot of people are in between, and it kind of feels like this perpetual situationship with the universe. Like, what is this all going toward? And it's been a 9-year in numerology. So it's been all these endings and all of this, like looking back to the past and feeling all this karma, like bottlenecking into the fall, where you just kind of keep repeating these like past patterns and maybe dealing with maybe some melancholy or some regret or some just being very ponderous and ruminating. And I think people are like, oh, like, this has got to be like pushing us towards something. We just can't like hang out here forever. Interstage right or interstage left, whatever the saying is, Gemini full moon, where Gemini full moon every year is like, here's the lights, here's the presents, here's your Uber, here's your rushing to get last minute, party favors and text and emails and FaceTimes with friends and family. It's this rush of activity, and it comes in here and says, all right, this is how we're going to tie all this up. And then you'll get the Sag new moon after it on the 20th, and I'll put a nice little bow on it, and then you're done. And then you're good. You get 2 days to just savor that, and then we go into the winter solstice, and then we go into Christmas, and Mars and Mercury and Venus will join the sun there in Capricorn, and it's like, yeah, no more of that. No more just like rolling in the realm of infinite possibility. Like it's you're on the straight and narrow now. So I considered this lunation, like this lunar cycle this year, not just because it's flipped, but because of some things I'll talk about, as closing remarks. That's how I would frame it. As we have been in this interlude since August 23rd. We went through these very powerful eclipses in September that had us simmering in a lot of retrograde energy as well. And we have just watched reality just kind of soften and unravel. And these are the closing remarks on that. This is why it's happened. This is why you had to reflect on all this stuff. This is why you had to let this stuff go. Because we're going to get a bunch of Capricorn energy. We're going to get a bunch of Aries energy also in February, with Saturn and Neptune meeting at the world beginning point at 0 Aries on Valentine's Day. It's going to be a 1 year in numerology. It's going to be a year of the horse on the February 17th Lunar New Year, which also kicks off the new Aquarius cycle of eclipses. Horses are very independent. Aquarius eclipse cycles are very independent. One numerology is very independent. It's also a big year for the founding of America, so we'll have a lot of that independent energy through that. You can't have this independent, I'm taking this straight and narrow solo track unless you've got your backlog cleaned out. And yeah, mutable energy in general, Virgo, Pisces axis, Gemini, Sagittarius, is very much about information and closure and sorting through the odds and ends bin in a thrift store where it's like old cassette tapes and shirts and photographs and things like that. And it's all of these bits of information that are like, well, you think about when it happens, that all the mutable signs happen in shoulder seasons. Like Sagittarius season between Thanksgiving and winter solstice is like, it's all that like pre-winter kind of post-fall transition. So we're sorting through all this stuff, and we're getting closing remarks, so to speak, from the universe on what's been happening in our lives since about August 23rd, really like September 7th, and saying like, we had to do this for a few months, but now things are getting really straight and narrow, and you have to go live your life. You have to be an individual, which is a very, hard but exciting task, and go make something in the world. And we've needed this parenthetical pause or bubble in time for you to, you want to keep that cassette tape, you want to get rid of that shirt, like sort through the odds and ends bin, know what you want to keep karmically and what you want to get rid of. And, I do a lot of client work, and definitely that's come up a lot. It's just people, like when they met with their family last week, they're like noticing these patterns. That's what mutable signs are. They're informational patterns. And, maybe you're not going to be that role in your family anymore. You're not going to play that role of, I've got to busy myself sacrificing my own emotional centeredness to take care of everyone else's neuroses or something, just as an example. And so a lot of people are closing stuff out in preparation for the very like hard-nosed and very pointed winter reset that we're going into. And I really want to emphasize that the last time I talked about generational strife, and I'm not saying like everything has to be this, I'm not going to talk to my old friends. I'm not going to talk to my old family. I'm not going to talk to my old lovers or whatever. I mean, you could just do completely blank slate. I think that's fine. But I'm really, why I'm saying this is I'm not encouraging you to interpret this as like a scorched earth type thing. We did have that Scorpio new moon on the 20th that, as I talked about in the previous video, did raise a lot of generational strife. But the reason for that is it wasn't about patterns and information. It was about the resources that we have. And I'll highlight that again. I'll go through that little spiel here again. But, it was this sense of like, I don't know, I always like the example of going back to Uranus, and people, by the way, I get so many comments about people saying like, you got to say it like Uranus, and, I really want you to, you got to say it like this. And, I guess really the super proper way would be Uranus, but I say it quickly so it sounds like Uranus. So it's Uranos because it relates to the sky god, which is Uranus. He's the god of the skies, which is Aquarius, which is funny because Aquarius is an air sign, but it's got aqua in it because Uranus relates to like urination and dew and rain, because that's what happens is the sky brings rain down to the earth. Just like Aquarius, the avatar of the fixed air sign of Aquarius, is a man with an urn that is filled with water, and he dumps out the water and delivers it like an aqueduct. He's this very humanitarian figure to the populace so that they can have clean drinking water and flourish as a civilization that's very intelligent and innovative. So it's interesting that Uranus, or Uranus as I like to say, has this kind of water-air dichotomy. But yeah, we've had Uranus in Taurus since 2018, and he was squaring Pluto in Capricorn multiple times throughout the 2010s. He and Pluto fused in Virgo in the 60s, and those are two volatile planets. They created all that change, and then they're opening square many decades later, because it's always conjunction, square, opposition, square again, conjunction again. It's kind of like a lunar cycle: new moon, first quarter, full moon, last quarter, new moon. The planets do that too. So the Uranus and Pluto fused in Virgo in the 60s. They squared in the 2010s. Uranus and Aries, which is that, again, independent, straight and narrow energy. Pluto and Capricorn, which again is that kind of independent, straight and narrow energy. And it created YouTube. It created Instagram. It created X, Twitter. It created the kind of new way of looking at the world that was born out of the 60s promise of a new, a much more public society where people talked about what was happening in our public spaces. And so that brought us, then Uranus moved into Taurus, and all of that inflected. So we have all this stuff. We have smartphones in our pockets. We have YouTube, etc. And then now we have apps. We have DoorDash. We have Uber. We have Tinder. And so now we get what is Taurus? The basic necessities: food, love, work. All that stuff became appified. And it was good for a little bit. And then now you get to this point where Uranus is at the end of Taurus, and people are like, Tinder is unusable. DoorDash is like, my nachos are cold and half smashed when they leave it on the doorstep. I can't work for Uber because of they have weird policies, or they're not maybe accepting, they're not hiring in my particular locale. So, that promise of just omnipresent employment through gig economy is just like off the table. And so people have soured on that. And that's where that generational strife, I think, came from with the Scorpio new moon on the 20th, where people were like, I'm tired of the bootstrap. I'm tired of the bootstrap messaging of just go out there and like work harder, because for us, all of this change came to us through technology, and it was going to solve it. And we were going to just do what the boomers did when they had their Uranus Pluto conjunction in Virgo, which was just go out and do things. And these legacy systems would support it. But the Pluto Uranus square of the 2010s basically dismantled legacy systems, and they don't work in people's best interest now. And so even though we have all of these things at our fingertips, it's all fragmenting and crumbling after a kind of a brief moment that seemed like, there was maybe this brief moment in the 2010s where it seemed like a kind of strange promise that it held out. It was like, oh, we have all these apps. You can go into Tinder, get a date, then you can go into this locally owned brewery, and they have this kind of like hip avocado toast, and it's this refurbished warehouse, and it's revitalizing the local economy. It kind of seemed like, oh, like Uranus square Pluto, and then Uranus moving into Taurus after that is this kind of, I always like this term. I saw it somewhere. You've heard of like stomp clap hipster music. They called it stomp clapitalism. I thought that was rather clever. It's basically kind of like, farmers market economy. And I think we're going to even go beyond that, where things are going to get even more micro than that, because it was still this big tent sense of, okay, we'll just replace kind of Walmart and this monoculture with this kind of hipster culture, this alternative to the mainstream. But both of those have broken down now, and I think everything is just subcultural now. I talked about last time how, the Starbucks pumpkin spice latte phenomenon, when it came out, represented this kind of mainstream dominance of normie culture, and now it's like a subcultural cult or micro tribe, just like people who listen to some underground dark synthwave band at the side stage at Coachella. Like there's no singular centralized culture now that is giving us a supply chain of meaning, where it's like, oh, you want work, oh, you want a date, oh, you want some like delicious, interesting, innovative food, like you do this. Like in the past, it may have been you go out of your house and you go to like kind of like a gentrifying area of town, and then a little bit after that, it's like, well, maybe you just go to Tinder and DoorDash and Uber for it. And then now And before all of that, before smartphones and technology, the boomer way was just, you need some pot or whatever. Probably your neighbor has some. Like, they really had the big tent economy, the supply chains of meaning, where everything was a shared cultural conversation. Everybody was more or less on the same page, even if you were coming at things from an alternative viewpoint. And now it's like, I don't know, my neighbor may be listening to some kind of subcultural niche that borders on, some kind of cultish fetish. Like, everything is so reality tunneled that, and they probably think the same about me, and so it's a hyper fragmented landscape, and that, I think, has amped up a lot of tension this fall. And so when people are letting go of their patterns of perceiving this through the Gemini full moon now, I don't think it'll have as much of the rancor and resentment and the simmering frustration of the Scorpio new moon that this is the full moon in answer to, because it is the waxing moon that was built up by the dark moon of Scorpio on 11/20. I think that, this pop moment, this answer that we're getting with the Gemini full moon, it will feel lighter. It won't have, like, because you would think with such an intense Scorpio new moon, the pop moment of the full moon answering to it would probably be like blood in the streets or something like that, or just some kind of like riot. But I think it's going to be like, oh, so that's the pattern. Like, maybe I was feeling a little bit browbeaten by the older generation telling me that my problems are all self-inflicted, but instead of using that to just engage in some kind of generational conflict with them, I will quietly understand that, my kind of habitual reactionary emotional response to that line of messaging is, I'm just going to turn that off. I'm just going to change the channel and focus on what I can do to kind of build out from where I am now. I'm just going to kind of pattern out a new reality. I want to. So the ruler of a Gemini new moon is Mercury, right? And Mercury went direct around Black Friday, and he is at this point where the Scorpio new moon, which again is the seed for this full moon, was on the 20th. He's back up there, and he activates this thing that the new moon did. So that's pretty interesting too, is that he's back around the degrees of the new moon and saying that, that lesser of generational resentment isn't fully over, but let's not go overboard. Like, let's do the Gemini full moon thing and look at the patterning and be like a little constructive about it. Just toss the stuff you don't need and build forward with the stuff that works for you. Keep this stuff in the odds and end bin and throw the rest in the trash or donate it. So this is Ernest down here at the end of Taurus, right? Doing all that shock and awe of like, oh yeah, I gave you all these apps and stuff like that, but it was maybe you had about like 10 years to use them, and then these are already kind of obsolete. And so you have Saturn and Neptune at the end of Pisces, and Jupiter at the end of Cancer, and Mercury, in this case, in this older drawing, it was the new moon at the end of Scorpio, and they created this beautiful grand trinity, the water trine. And because these 2 points at the end of Cancer and Pisces, respectively, were sextile 30 degrees away from Uranus and the late degrees of Taurus, they formed what was a kite. This looks like a kite because we have Mercury today, but the new moon back on the 20th, opposite, forming the backbone of the kite, and these are the wings. So Mercury recreates it, and he is the ruler of this full moon that answers to this new moon drawing here. And he says, like, look, we're going to continue looking at this issue that I've been unpacking here for you. which is basically years and years and years of societal change coming to this point before 2026, where we have to decide what, and not just the fall, the past 3 months, but it's really the past several years with all these planets, especially Saturn and Neptune. Neptune has been in Pisces since been there since like 2011, long time. Saturn's been there since March of 23. Uranus has been there since 2018. And before that, again, he was in Aries squaring Pluto, kind of giving us smartphone culture. No, we're looking at all this stuff. It's like, and Pluto just came into Aquarius. Like I said, he's going to crack 2 degrees. He was in Capricorn from 2008 to 24, election day 24, thereabouts. All the long cycles coming to completion, not just this 3-month cycle, but these mutable signs, Gemini and Sagittarius, but also Virgo and Pisces, help wrap all that up. They're gonna say like, all right, what did you think about life from 2018 till now? This app culture. What did you think about life from 2010 to 2018, which was the rise of the smartphones that gave rise to on-demand dating, food, and work app culture? What did you think about 2008 to 2024, which was all about basically the transition from a mostly analog world still at that time to this hybridized, half of our life, kind of exists in these digital avatars now. Even if you don't really participate, even the president of the United States has a social media account. Like, who would have thought? That's a huge change from 2008 to 25. So we're looking back on these bigger cycles that were heightened and brought to our attention by these eclipses and the unfortunate deaths that happened. And I'll talk more about that during the eclipses, signaling like we've gone through so much change as a society, and some of it may have seemed promising at first, and it maybe still can be in a little bit of a way, but probably only in a partial piecemeal patchwork way. I don't think we could just go with an unreformed version of the gig economy that kind of blossomed in 2018 and just assume that it'll work in 26. I highly, highly doubt that. In fact, I'm just going to say no, it's not going to work. I'm popping out of frame here because I've just got like all my drawings and notes here and stuff. So thanks for bearing with me. So, we go into 2026, and because it's more of this blank slate, this kind of one numerology energy, we got to tie all this up. We got to tie all this up in December and decide what we want to keep from these years and these lessons and what we want to let go. Like, maybe you decide, like, maybe my whole thing is I think the Match Group, which owns all the dating apps or something, is total crap, and I'm just like, my platform is to just badmouth them and show how they're a monopoly and all that. Great, I think that's fine. I think, and I'm going to talk about that too. I think, the more you can smash these monoliths, the better. Other people may be like, well, I'll use them this way strategically here and there, and such a way, and it's more of like a supplement or whatever. That's great too. Because that's also my big point here is that 26 is a blank slate, not in terms of like, well, now it's all going to come together for everyone in a one-size-fits-all way. You're going to have to decide on an individual basis what you want to keep and what you want to let go. There's no right or wrong answer here. It's a horizon of multiple futures. And companies and governments are not going to like that. I think that even when there's good, benevolent people there, and a lot of it comes down to incompetence, just because these organizations just are so used through legacy and cultural inertia to keeping things very bureaucratic. They are not going to like that aspect of reality coming down the pipe, where people just have an ability to build out their individual culture in a way they see fit. It's not like you're picking up, I don't know, like I would read Wired magazine a lot in the 2010s, and it'd be these in-depth good features about, these co-ops of people living 10 in a house in San Francisco, and here's the app that they're going to build, and we were all fascinated with it. Like, Now people are like, well, cool if you want to do that, but I'm not really interested in that. Like, we don't have that centralized big tent culture anymore, where it's like, this is the thing. This is the thing that you got to do to get resources and supply chains and meaning in life. You can just be like, yeah, whatever, like, that's great, but I don't really, it's not my lane. And that's very freeing. I love that about the 2026 and the way forward. Um, so Gemini, excuse me, Gemini has a way of being rather skeptical. It is the citizen journalist. It's, I'm going to ask hard questions. So I think one of the ways that this full moon will help us is rather than like, we'll have this impulse to kind of like chase down closure, but I think we're really going to attract it because I think one of the things you'll see in governments and media and just, maybe some friends and cliques around you is, well, this is the way you put the puzzle together. This is the answer. And there's going to be a lot of confirmation bias in the air, or the game of telephone, where it's like, you start at a party where someone whispers in someone's ear, Billy's in love with Jane. And, you get to the last person and so the original person who wrote the message goes to the last person and says, all right, let's compare notes. Like, what was the last thing that you heard? And it's Jason's moving to Philly. And it just shows how the chain of information morphs. And we're going to see that during this time where, the way that you're trying to wrap up all the stuff that's been happening since the fall, all the stuff that's been happening since 2018, since the 20 Sins, since 2008, it can be rewritten very easily by propaganda and confirmation bias and prejudice. And these interpretive lenses that mutable signs always are fascinated with. And it's like, don't get stuck on one point. Don't get stuck on one mode of interpretation and shoehorn yourself just yet. Like, you may be imagining yourself as a freedom fighter against these monopolistic apps, which may be great, but before you throw all your eggs in that basket, because things get locked in winter, and you don't want to be in a situation where you're like, well, that kind of lit my fire for a month, but now I'm tired and I'm actually more of a homebody, I realized, rather than an activist, and I just want to sit at home and drink tea and knit. It's like, well, that's kind of what December is all about. It's like, well, like, hold on, like, before you kind of retrospectively put this gloss on how your life has been going and make some kind of judgment call at the Sagittarius new moon on the 20th, and Sag is always very black and white and very dogmatic. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's just the energy. And then we go right into all this Capricorn energy very quickly within days. It's like when you make that judgment call based on all this stuff that's coming up at the Gemini full moon, we're coming out of this very kind of almost resentful, angry, and again, I just hate using judgment, like value-laden terms, but it's just the energy, this kind of like rancorous Scorpio new moon on the 20th, before you kind of boil all that down and grab some takeaway on the December 20th Sagittarius new moon, like, do the Gemini thing, check your facts, call your sources, double check your interview against, go to the library. And someone says, America was founded in 1776 or, 1736, go to the library and kind of like double check what they said, even if they call themselves a historian. Like, listen to the ways in which you may be trying to force or rush a conclusion as you're chasing down closure at this time. But you're going to get a lot of clues. I think you're going to get a lot of information, a lot of thoughts that kind of help you tie all these threads together. It could be quite good. I think it'll be good, personally. So right now we have this parade of planets. Before we get all into Capricorn, soon Mercury will join the party. But, we have the sun there, we have Venus, we have Mars there in Sagittarius. And they're all coming out of Scorpio. So it's this death in Scorpio and this rebirth in Sagittarius. And what they're doing is they're stoking this grand cross. We have the sun. Venus is pretty close. Mars is a little further down, and he's going to start squaring Saturn and Neptune that are in the late degrees of Pisces soon, which is, I'm not exactly looking forward to that, but because Mars square Saturn seems very authoritarian to me, and Mars square Neptune feels like deception. And this is what I'm saying. Like, you have to use all the astrology within these lunar cycles. Like, I think that after this full moon going into the Sag new moon, which is about making a judgment call before things get straight and narrow in the winter, you're probably going to see all sorts of propaganda. Oh, we got to do this. We got to pull this emergency brake. We got to press the accelerant on this. Yeah, that's probably what that Mars square is going to do. So we've got the sun and Sag here, opposite, as always, for a full moon, the moon, which is in Gemini. Very libertine and free-spirited and free-willing. Venus is up there, which I like. I feel like she's kind of like, let's get this party started. Then you've got the lunar nodes, which have been North Node in Pisces, saying more faith and more flow, and South Node in Virgo, less analysis paralysis and needing things to make logical sense. That has been happening since the spring. That's when these nodes shifted. We had the moon itself on top of the North Node on September 7th for the eclipse. And then we had the sun and moon on the Virgo South Node on the September 21st new moon solar eclipse in Virgo, which was the date of Charlie Kirk's funeral. And so by degree, this sun and this moon are squaring the nodes, and this is called a grand cross. All four mutable planets at kind of the middle degrees of the mutable signs are lit up by squares. And then just as the sun is opposite the moon, yes, the north node is always opposite the south node. That's how it works. And so it's called a grand cross. In this case, it's a mutable grand cross. And the cross is like matter. It's like 3D. It's very like hard angles, 90 degrees. But since it's mutable, this is softening our world. All the dimensions of our world are softening so that we can get all the information that we need to tie up these loose ends. And so the sun is saying the answer's out there. The full moon in Gemini is saying, yes, but you need all the pieces first before you get a takeaway. The north node is saying that takeaway is going to lead you into a flow state where you piece it together as you go. And the south node in Virgo is saying, don't try to force a square peg through a round hole. Don't be one of those people who has a conclusion and then you work backwards from that and you find everything that confirms the conclusion along the way. That's bad science. We don't want to do that. We don't want to do that here on this channel either. We really want to avoid confirmation bias. Astrology is both an art and a science, right? So this mutable grand cross is and Mercury, by the way, rules Virgo. So we want to look to him again, just like we look to him to understand the full moon in Gemini. And he's doing this thing. This is what Mercury's doing. He's the tail of the kite, pushing us to understand the ravages and the delights too. It's not all bad. The ravages and the delights of the past, since 2018, since the 2010s, since really 2008, all this new technological world that we live in. He's pushing us to see it, and he's saying, don't say it's good just because it makes sense to say it's good. Also, don't say it's bad just because it makes sense to say that it's bad. Like, really lean into the flow of how you've been moving through time to understand why you don't like some things about this culture and why you do, and why you feel it works in some ways and why you feel it's not going to work going forward. Don't try to pundit your way. Don't try to expert your way through managing this transition, because you're just going to give yourself an answer that sounds good on paper, and then when you have to go live it, it doesn't feel aligned with life as it's lived. It's more, it just makes sense in your mind that you hate this thing about culture and that you like this thing about it, but it doesn't really work in terms of who you are as a person. Like, if, I don't know, maybe you come to some very angry conclusions, but you're not a very angry person, and you'd rather sip tea and knit at home and create a little micro community about, making homemade things. And that's how you can contribute to the greatness of the world starting in 2026, instead of, getting a pitchfork and rallying against a monopoly. Even if it is objectively a monopoly, this may not be the way that you should put the information together, because it's not your path. It may be someone else's role, and maybe and you can quietly like support them. It's just, it's so easy to make judgment calls on our culture now, because we live in such a multifaceted, fragmented world. But, dancing on the pinhead of critique or praise, some people drink the Kool-Aid and they're all about, I don't know, Bitcoin or AI or whatnot, or fully Luddite, fully offline, whatever. I wake up to the chickens. Whatever it is, it's just like we live in such a multifaceted, fragmented world that it's easy to use information in a way that just auto gives us a narrative. And I think that's why people are just so like self-involved lately, and not in a good way. It's like people can feel very kind of fake. It's like everything's so rationalized, and it just they make everything make sense. And your life should make sense. It should be aligned. You should be having everything kind of fall into place, but not from a way where it feels like this eternal PR push for like, I do this and this is the best thing in the world, and here are all the statistics and cultural critiques to prove that, and this is why you're not on my team and in my cult. It's like you kind of want to avoid that, because it just makes everything a self-fulfilling prophecy, rather than this creative flourish and renaissance where everybody can run towards a horizon of multiple futures, and we can live in a world where everybody gets to pursue their unique definition of sovereignty, which, a lot of this stuff is very revolutionary. It's almost like the advent of the printing press, where we've lived in a very kind of controlling world where it's like, it's very normative, and like you have to fit into these supply chains of meaning and these very limited set of archetypes in order to survive. It's like, oh, so you say you're this, so you have to walk this way and talk this way and be this way and shack up with these kinds of people and work in these kinds of places and go and eat there and dress this way. And it's like, we should embrace the fact that we're getting the heck out of that. And so we need to use information in a way that doesn't replicate the kind of very punitive, very censorship driven, very totalitarian, reactionary mode of being that's like, well, the reason that I'm pursuing this is because, well, don't you just see how much it makes sense? And why don't you get it? And the fact that it doesn't make sense to you is the reason that you're going to get left behind and why I'm going to inherit the world. Like, you really just kind of want to avoid that way of piecing together things and see it more as like a kaleidoscope of possibility. And then you can lock into that, and it doesn't feel like you're confined and that other people are confined. It's like, it opens up, I think, the possibility for trade. Oh, you go and do this thing where you like drink tea and make little like crocheted things, and you sell it like on a small marketplace. Like, oh, that gives me a feeling of comfort. Why don't I buy that from you? I do this, like I trade crypto or something like that. Here's a way for me to, oh, you're interested in that, I'll teach you that, I'll teach you that, in exchange. It feels more like a renaissance in that way. So just looking at my notes here. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like, I want to keep these dialogues pretty tight too, so I don't want to go on too many tangents. Um, yeah, I think one of the last things that I want to say on this is that um, we are getting to a place where people may try to consolidate a lot in response to this multiplicitous horizon that can feel very fearsome coming up, and they can try to clamp down on it as a way of, it could be a malicious form of control. It could be a form of panic. It could come from a benevolent angle, like we can't have people without some kind of meta narrative in their life, so we need to create like another war, or we need to create a villain in collective consciousness to fight against, to unify. So yeah, it could feel like when you have this patchwork horizon, that these unitive efforts to bring things together into a one-size-fits-all worldview, where it just, like I was saying, like why wouldn't you think this makes sense, right? This very kind of like assumptive, dogmatic energy. I think that I've been calling these the glass lands, right? You look at what happened last week with um, what was the company's name? Omnicom, which is now like the largest marketing and advertising company in the world. It's just kind of eating everything up, and everything's becoming this large, smooth, homogeneous glassland, like an anonymous international airport terminal. And it's going to cause this creative exodus of people who don't want to inhabit that. But the incentive that people will see in inhabiting that will be like, oh, you get access to the glasslands. You get to live in the safety of this monolith that has all the old legacy resources. And people are like, well, maybe I want something more textured and vital and mysterious. Maybe I'll go and start my own agency with myself or a small group of people. And we won't we won't pay the piper in that way. We won't play along to the idea that in order to feel creativity in the world, we have to live in this kind of feudal system where in order to thrive creatively, we have to live in this very consolidated landscape where things are really dictated from maybe a body that just has no face to it. That screams very much like the dark side of Pluto and Aquarius to me, which is like the old Apple ad where she throws like a hammer at this kind of monolithic face on a wall that everybody's kind of watching passively, in this sense of like infinite jest. And he's like, obey, obey. And she kind of smashes the machine. Because I think that's what's happening, is this, that we'll see this idea of access as the incentive to join these smooth glasslands. Like, oh, you can get, oh, this is what I'm talking about, like retroactively rewriting stuff. Like, oh, you couldn't go get a significant other on Tinder. Well, that's a shame. Like, you didn't get in there while you didn't get yours before it's gone. And so instead of encouraging people to see that there's new ways to go and create community out there, they're shaping this narrative of like, well, you missed it, but we the benevolent tyrants, we the saviors come in here, and you can have an AI girlfriend or AI boyfriend, and we're actually working with boards of directors so that these digital avatars have rights, just like marriage partners have rights legally, and no one can pull the plug on your relationship with this person, and you can have this kind of like support system back in your life, but we will manage it for you all on the back end, and all you have to do is just kind of like show up, and just kind of enter these smooth glass lands where everything just kind of pushes you along, and there's no buffer, and there's no personal sovereignty, and there's no personal building within that narrative. Yeah, it's it could get pretty gnarly with that kind of stuff. Um, so yeah, I think it's interesting. I think some of these larger companies know this is coming. SoundCloud announced over Thanksgiving that it's not taking 20% revenue share off of streaming for artists. It's giving 100% back to them. Like, some of these legacy institutions know that the arc of time is not really on their side. Others are kind of like, well, like Omnicom, like, let's just consolidate so that we're the only game in town, and then we can kind of control the narrative. If someone wants to be a creative advertiser, like, they're going to come to us, or they're going to have to be the underdog. Chanel, I think, is doing that too. They're venturing into kind of multimedia work, with A$AP Rocky being an ambassador of all people, and he stars in this short film that kind of feels like a French New Wave 1967 film, which was the last time Saturn was in Aries. He was also in Aries in 97. The director of this short film, Michel Gondry, basically pioneered what's called bullet time. It showed up in the film The Matrix in a 1997 Smirnoff ad called Smarienberg, which actually starred a couple escaping a Nazi. He didn't have the Nazi insignia on, but it's very clear that this guy's a Nazi. And that's what I'm saying. Like, when Saturn goes into Aries with Neptune in February, after we have all this Capricorn energy, like, it gets really hard. It gets really militant. And we're seeing this lineup where people are preparing for that. Stuff is signaling in the I almost said the electric unconscious. I kind of like that. In the collective unconscious, that we're heading towards that horizon. And so when Michel Gondry pioneered that new video technique in 97, and he did so in a way that was about a military narrative, that's coming back up now. And he's kind of, his little like short vignette with A$AP Rocky and Margaret Qualley is highlighting this new creative director that's coming for Chanel. And he was actually hired on April 1st, which is Aries season. And it was interesting. Like, he did his show a couple of days ago on the 2nd. And I talked last time how I think a lot of the fashion in spring 26 is going to be a lot about the military. And someone commented on my video last time, because I said last time when Saturn was in Aries in 97, we saw Rose McGowan, who was dating Marilyn Manson at that time, wearing chainmail and like a leopard or a cheetah print thong. And it was this whole idea of like things had been stripped bare. And it's not like the suggestive nudity of Sydney Sweeney. It's the nudity of the fact that we're in a kind of a systemic reset. Well, go to, it's on Chanel's site. Like, just search, Matthew Blasey, Blazy, or Chanel Spring Summer 26. Go look at what's on there. There's literally a woman wearing chainmail. It's crazy. I couldn't believe it. I was like, well, I could, because this is what we do here, but I was like, this is wild. And it's and the short film is directed by Michel Gondry, who pioneered this film technique, and it was all about through a narrative of escaping the Nazis. I'm like, this is crazy to see these astrological signatures. And even so, Saturn Aries in 66, 67, 96, 97, and then 2026, 2027. Even Matthew Blasi's, a lot of his other stuff for spring 2026 looks like stuff from 67, kind of this Mary Tyler Moore kind of tweed, kind of like women's business attire, very tight silhouettes. I said that the big Sydney Sweeney kind of billowy stuff is going to go away. A lot of big cat prints too, like again, like tiger, cheetah prints on those dresses. Like this hot, straight and narrow energies coming in, and we're all tying it up through this Gemini full moon and the Sag new moon in December. And yeah, it's even the big houses like this are starting to see how things are fragmenting, and doing these kind of micro avant-garde pop-ups, which Blasi did. His show was in the Bowery subway as a pop-up. We did this, Gondry did this kind of avant-garde microfilm. And so, yeah, it's even the big houses are realizing that we're all going to kind of author our own futures very soon. And maybe Omnicom is more of the opinion that you'll just have to live with us or go fend for yourself in the desert. And then SoundCloud is more like, all right, like we don't want the smoke, like we're good, like we don't want our like customers coming after us for not paying our artists and taking 20% when we already like own like a big share of the streaming that happens out there. So like we're good, like we're gonna give it to our artists. Like it's interesting to see the glasslands versus the patchwork age coming in. It's just it just really says to me it's not like the big tent 90s anymore, where you could be like Kurt Cobain, or you could be like the normie journalist interviewing him for the masses, where things had this nice kind of dialogue between mainstream and alternative, and it was easier to get by in culture. I think it's fascinating. I was watching an old 93 interview with them, and Chris was like, they were from a little town called Aberdeen. It wasn't even Seattle, right? And he was like, yeah, you get out west and it's like Boise and then Spokane and Seattle and Olympia, Aberdeen, China. He's like, it's really like the edge of the world. And it's like, we won't have that anymore. We won't have those like small town heroes that become national treasures like Cobain anymore. We'll have these small town treasures in an even greater way, because we're all going to be kind of finding each other through these networks now. It's just that maybe like, your parents aren't going to know who I am, or vice versa. Like if you're some kind of like rising star, like my family's not going to know who you are, but like I go and talk to someone on a corner, like they're probably wearing a Nirvana shirt and they may have never even listened to them. That's just like how pervasive the old big tent culture was. So, that is just kind of gone, and we have to live. I think it's interesting that the memorial bridge that Kurt Cobain slept under in Aberdeen, because he wasn't with his family, like as a teen, that bridge itself is breaking down, and they're thinking of scrapping it because it's like structurally unsound. And so like the bridge back to the big tent culture, where we had a very stable set of archetypes, where it was like, well, if you don't want to work for the mainstream, like you can work for the alternative. Now that's gone. Now it's like what you have is like Omnicom is like, I'm going to buy every advertising agency in the world, and you can work for us in the glasslands, or you can go into the patchwork horizons of multiple futures and work with all these like smaller avant-garde creators and make one of the most exciting societies available to us since the advent of the printing press. And I think that's exciting. I think, again, even Chanel sees that. They're making these like little micro avant-garde films because they know like a lot of people are going to come out of this fall transition and they're going to be like, you know what? I'm going into 2026 and I'm going after it. I'm going to make my world in the way that aligns with the path that I see for myself. And I'm going to put all the information that I've seen supporting that together into a vision. I'm going to trash all that old karma. I'm going to donate it, recycle it, get rid of it. And I'm going to start, because the world is open to it now. I don't have to hide myself. I can be myself out in the world and find other people that support it. And so, yeah, I do. I think it's a little bit of a spectrum. You know, you kind of have the Omnicom reaction, which is like, well, we're the only game in town. Good luck, underdog. Versus, you know, SoundCloud, which is like, you know, that's cool. Like, we'll let you do that. Like, here's money, artists. Like, we're not going to take it all the way to like Chanel, which is, you know, working with Michelle Gondry and being like, you know what, like, yeah, that's cool. Like, if you're like a small like fashion designer or something like that, like, don't think that you have to be the next Chanel because you can't. Like, there's not going to be another Chanel in the future. There's not going to be another Kurt Cobain. Like, go start your small fashion house and we'd love to see you out here. Like, go tear it up, you know, best of luck to you kind of thing. I don't know if that's their real message, but I'm just kind of reading the landscape in that way. So exciting times in December where all of this kind of lands at your feet and gives you a recipe for success. Basically, you can start writing your own adventure. What are those old books like Choose Your Own Adventure? You read them in grade school. Like, you get to chapter 3 and it's like, John is at a cliff. Go to chapter 6 if he decides to hop on the dirt bike, or like go to chapter 7 if you decide to take the rope swing down the canyon. You know, and it's just, this is where we're at with all this mutable energy interfacing with the mutable energy of the eclipses. So what I would like to hear from you down in the comments is how are you managing this? How are you putting the information together that takes you out into an adventure? I mean, Sagittarius, the number one key word is an adventure. It's all going to coalesce around the 20th. And then it's like we go into our winter story with this adventure, like, yeah, it's going to be hard. Yeah, there's going to be maybe some naysayers, but this is my vision for the world. And so I want to hear how things are like coming together for you. Last thing I'll say, find me on X. I know I'm throwing like a lot of information at you. I give daily updates, so it's nice to keep track of this in a more piecemeal way. I'm Zypho Media on X. I would love my newsletters. I have like a really devoted readership. I'd love to have you over there. zyphomedia.substack.com, where I do a written version of this, and it's good to like refer back to. But I do try to timestamp these videos as well. Another thing I'll mention is I'm not going to be offering it after December, just because I'm going to be doing a different project, and it just also makes more logical sense, is that I am offering 2026 year in review, where I point out the very esoteric mega cycles that are happening every month for the next 12 months and showing how those cycles will affect your individual birth chart. And then you also get like a 12-month written document, more generalized. Everybody gets the same one that tells you how to decipher the news based on these mega cycles happening every month of the year in 2026. The whole idea is independence, but you know, sometimes the cycle is there's going to be a big Leo eclipse. You know, there's that big meeting from Neptune and Saturn at 0 degrees Aries. That's going to be very, very military focused in February. There's a big conjunction in Capricorn between Venus and Mars and Sun and Mercury right in January. That's going to reset relationships. So people have been super happy with those. They're 2-hour recordings, and you get the written companion document with it. So just another way for us to connect and build out this community together. That's what this is all about. So I've been really enjoying the comments. I've been really enjoying the feedback and how it's been resonating with people. That's exciting. As you can tell, like a ton of research goes into these. And I really just, my mission is to just help you understand what's going on out here and help you stay ahead of the curve. You know, I've got all these notes, just really trying to get you into a finer understanding that none of this is random. Like we are truly in historic times right now, and we should all be making the best of it. And so, throw questions down in the comments section too. I'm happy to explore those tangents with you there too. So yeah, find me in those other places, and I look forward to seeing you here next time.